Hello everyone, and welcome again to another Ableton Live tutorial. My name is Michael and I go by the name Radio Moon. And today we're going to be talking about warping samples and why it's one of the most fundamental techniques for learning Ableton Live and making music. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So like the intro said, we're going to be talking about warping samples today, and Beatgridding are clips so they match up with the BPM of the song, so that everything kind of lines up and sounds in time. So what is Beatgridding? Beatgridding is conforming an audio or a MIDI clip so that it matches up to the grid, and when it plays back, it remains in time. And this technique is like very useful, very fundamental when making music, and just allows you to be more creative and kind of put these little building blocks together so you can start building your tracks. So it's crucial for creating music and also DJing, so everything just lines up in time. And so I'm going to be going over some examples both with audio and MIDI, and just kind of talking things over. This might be somewhat in depth, but some of the features I might not go all the way in depth and might cover in a later video. So I have some clips already kind of preloaded in here, and I just want to kind of show you how this works and why it's so useful. So in this first channel here, I just have some like audio examples that I've already loaded in. And so when I let's say like I'm in my browser and I like load this into Ableton, I'm going to just choose this. And if you notice down here, this is like the clip editor panel. You're going to see this number that shows up. Ableton has already automatically chosen to warp the sample a certain way. And you can turn that on and off right here. So if I were to hit warp, this turns it off. And so that no matter what the BPM is, this is going to play back in its normal time. But if I hit warp, when I adjust this, it's going to shift the timing of the whole sample. This number right here is the native BPM for the sampler, what Ableton read it as. And you can see it's 94.97. So in order for this sample to play back at the same time or in its normal time, this number up here, the global BPM, and this number need to be the same. All right, so starting off, we need to talk about two things. The most important things when it comes to Beatgridding, the tools that we need are our ears to help identify when these beats are going to be happening, and then also this right up at the top left, it's indicated by these two circles right here. This is our metronome, and so this will count out the beats for us. So you can see like right here, this is the meter of the song or the clip, and it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. And when we turn this on and we play this, it's gonna go 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that just kind of helps us keep everything in time. It's just like our little guide that we can listen to make sure that these beats are the moments that we want to happen on beat are truly on beat. All right, so the first thing that is important when we're establishing or Beatgridding our clips is establishing where the 1 is. So like where the first click of the metronome is going to start counting 1, 2, 3, 4. So right here, it's kind of already established it. And I'll also just talk about a little bit more in detail here in the clip editor view. So up at the top is the beat grid or the meter of the song. So you can see it counts out 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And that is just kind of going to be our scale that's going to line up this whole clip. So establishing the 1, all you have to do, or we can establish it anywhere, but we just have to go to our first little transient marker. That's the other thing that's important to notice on these clips is these little gray triangles are what's called transient markers. This yellow marker is called a warp marker, and that's going to allow us to play around and make our adjustments. So establishing the 1, all we have to do is wherever our like playhead starts or we want it to start, we'll just line it up with this first transient or warp marker, then we'll hit right click and then we'll hit set 1.1 here. And so from here on out, this establishes the whole grid for the rest of the clip. All right, so from here, so we have our 1 established, and we noticed that this was warped at 94.97, but if we kind of go down the line, we might notice that some of these beats might not be lining up right on the grid. Like this one seems a little off. So how I think is the best way to do it is to start near the beginning. We've established where the 1 is, and then we'll just go to the next beat. We'll just play 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. So we want this to line up right on the 2. So we can see right here that the kick actually starts right here and the transient marker is a little bit off. So what we want to do is just kind of shift this in place. So I'm holding down the shift key and just moving that so it starts right on, or right where the kick starts. And then what we can do from here is just click on the transient marker and then just shift it so it lines up right with the 2. So see how this number, the BPM to the left in the clip editor, is shifting to match my edit. So now I've changed that to like 95.01. So I started near the beginning, and I'll just keep moving down the track and keep lining things up until this hits 95, which I think will be the correct BPM. So I just made these little quick adjustments, and we can just look down here to see that everything else is falling in time. See way down, bar 29 is lined up, way down here. Now it looks like the samples are lining up. So now I just need to adjust the global BPM down to 95, and then this sample will play in its native time. Great. So that one was pretty easy. Some other things to talk about are the warp modes, which I'll go into in later detail in another video. But if you select this menu, you'll see there are some options. So these are warp modes. This one is beats, and so what it's going to do is try to preserve, the next menu is going to tell you what it's trying to preserve, is the transients. So it's going to want to just like preserve where all these transient markers are located. And you can change these to different time divisions, like eighth notes, quarter notes, or whatever. And you can get really creative with these. So we have beats, we have tones, we have texture that kind of just analyzes like the textural elements of the sound. So like if you were to really stretch this out or slow it down or speed it up, it's going to preserve the textural qualities of the sample. Repitch will adjust the pitch of it depending on what the global tempo is. And then Complex and Complex Pro are more so for vocals. If you want a little bit more in-depth information, just click down on this triangle right here and go over all the different warp modes, or it's just going to tell you which ones they are right here. So it says beats, tones, textures. So take a look at that. But I'll be going over that in a later video. Anyways, so we're going to move on. So I'll show you one that was like really kind of off. So this is another beat that I made. So if I click the metronome, you can just hear that they're not in sync with each other. Ableton thought that this was 97, but in reality, I think it's going to be much faster. So starting off, we have our 1 established right here, right at the beginning of the first kick. So let's listen to this again and just follow along with the metronome to see, kind of count out where we think this should be. So we'll go. All right, so actually the 2 is going to be this kick right there. So to warp this, I'm just going to select right at the beginning of this kick where it was supposed to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 2. And so I'm going to take this and then line it up with the 2. And that's going to make a global change for this whole thing. So we'll go to this first one And then we'll move down to the second one, make a tiny adjustment here. Just keep going down the track. All right, so I think this is gonna line up better. And we'll just check way down at the end and just make sure that this is all falling in time. Play it. So now we can hear that everything's in time. 3, 4. So this is actually playing kind of fast because it's supposed to be at 69 BPM for it to be playing at the native tempo. So another quick thing to point out is if we brought this down to 69 or 70, this would play at its native speed, but technically I think it would be double time. So these divide by 2 and plus by 2 is gonna actually just double or divide the BPM in half. And so if we adjust that BPM to match this new one, it's going to need to be played at 137.99 or 138 for that. So they're actually kind of the same since it's doubled or halved. So we'll just go to 138 and then make our little adjustments here. And that will finish this one off. So close enough, but you get the idea that we need to kind of just make our little adjustments with these transient markers at the points that we want them to line up to the grid. And then our track and the global BPM will play at the same tempo. 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. Kind of hear how those sync up now. Now let's say we want to, like, you know, just another example, we're not really sure what our BPM, or when we dragged it in, say it was unwarped or something like that, and we want to create a loop that lines up with the grid. So I'm just going to take this guitar sample and I'm going to listen for when the loop starts that I want, and then create a loop. So right now the sample is unwarped. Just gonna listen a little bit longer. So say I want to loop right here. Boom, boom. So I kind of heard that the one of the loop will start right about there. So I'm gonna take this, put this here, go up to the play arrow and select set 1.11 here. And now that automatically warped this sample to a degree. Now above the play arrow is where we're gonna establish our loop markers. You see these two, it's gonna be like two arrows connected by a bar, is gonna establish our loop. And then we already have our one established here. So let's listen to this, and now we'll just use our metronome to figure out where our little 2-bar loop should be, or whatever 4-bar loop. 1, 4. So I want this, because you can kind of hear how that starts a new phrase. I want this to line up right about here. I'm going to shift this over a little bit, actually. So I'm holding down the shift key and then just adjusting the sample underneath the warp marker. Before, if I take this and adjust it, I can move the transient here. When I have a warp marker and I hit shift, that will adjust the sample underneath that, but keep the warp marker in the same place. So that's another little handy tip there. So now I have this kind of loop established. I'm going to select my time, hit Command L, and now I can kind of hear that the sample's in time. It might be a little bit off, and then you can just like go and make your adjustments. If I wanted to kind of move instance of this sample back. So this part I want it to land right on 3.3. I just double click on the transient marker to make it a warp marker and just slide that back. So now what's kind of interesting to notice is if I select in this amount of time as I compose, so in between these two warp markers, it's going to establish a specific BPM to make it warp so that it fits to the grid there. So if I select in this time, you'll notice that in between this marker and this marker is 22.10 BPM. And then in between this warp marker and this one is 120.99. So these warp markers can be, you know, make things that weren't played perfectly in time, like a guitar performance. It just adjusts all the BPM so they will line right up to the grid. And then you can like use samples, drums, loops, or anything to make these patterns. All right, so let's move on and talk about warping some MIDI. So in here, I just have a MIDI clip, and we're just going to listen to it and just try to figure out how we can get this better in time. So I kind of want that to be a 4-bar loop. And you'll notice with MIDI clips, the difference is it doesn't really have a native BPM because they're kind of, MIDI notes kind of operate dependent on whatever time that the global BPM is anyway. So they are more flexible. So warping a MIDI file is pretty similar, but there are some differences. You'll notice that there isn't any like transient markers or anything because it's not really trying to analyze an audio file. It's just analyzing when these events are going to occur in the MIDI file. So if we want to edit this though, so that this will be warped and then fit with the tempo of our song. See right now if we play it, it should be, this event should happen at after the first bar. So we're going to take and select all of our notes, and you'll see that what shows up when you make a selection is there's a warp marker right at the beginning of the last events in your selection. And then what you can do is kind of make an adjustment and it will affect all the notes simultaneously. So I want to take this and drag this to about here, and then adjust our loop to be here. Before it was a 6-bar loop and now it's a 4-bar loop. So let's listen to that with the metronome. All right, so it's not perfect, so we just need to make some additional edits. If I select a group of MIDI notes, I can make a bulk adjustment to all of them. If you see, if I go to the end, this little bracket shows up, and I can just shorten them here. Or if I want, I can make this perfect by just hitting Command U and then quantizing it. And then I can further edit this here. Take this one, move it over, and this one, just leave as is. So now you can hear that's a better sounding loop than before, so that if I added other elements like drums or whatnot, so I'll play this clip. It's a little fast, but now you can see how different elements, MIDI and audio, are just gonna line up in time. Let's do one more, like extracting something that wasn't necessarily started right on the one and making another loop. So I have this like, we have some piano chords here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're gonna make a selection, or we'll adjust our where we want to play from. You can go right here, set 1.1 here. So I want to make this like a 4-bar loop. So from here to here, just take this selection, move it over to roughly here. And then I'll just make the selection for this and loop selection. And now we'll, so you see how these things timed up. It was just like, I wanted this. Oh, it didn't really start on the one. So we'll set that, we'll reset that and make another quick adjustment. So I'm just kind of anticipating where my events want to line up, making a selection of everything, and then just retiming everything to the grid. Let's listen with the metronome. Oops, not quite on them. Just double check that your loop lengths are kind of in even increments by looking over here. Great. So now that's better in time, and if I want, I can just take this selection and crop it out so that I only have this. It was a bigger MIDI file, but now I have it just so it's this selection and it's in time, and I can just drag it into my track and it will work. That does it for today's video, and I hope you learned something new to help you in your music production process. If you have a comment or a question, feel free to leave them below, and as always, like and subscribe my channel for more Ableton Live tutorials. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you in the next one. Radio Moon, signing off.